Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome back to the Space Between Words. We're excited to be here, and man, we have a great story to start off with. I'm super excited about this because we just got back this week from a trip where our staff went to Charleston, and then came back, and you had driven all of us, which I just have to preface this, because you had a long day. So this is really important in the story, because you had dropped all of us off individually at our houses, and then you were going to take the rental car back so that you could pick up your Tesla.
Which was parked at the airport.
Parked at the airport to come to the leadership meeting.
Yep.
And then what happened? Please tell everybody.
I'm at the intersection, green light. I go, and my car died in the middle of the intersection. It had a 60% charge, so it wasn't a battery.
Not a battery issue.
Charge issue. It just died. And then on the screen, really dim, and a little turtle showed up on the bottom left, and it basically said, power had been reduced, pull over. I'm like, okay, so I'm like trying to pull it really slow. I put on the hazards, the whole deal, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I actually don't even know what to do right now. Like, this is not a normal car. Like,
Scoot.
And to put it in neutral, you have to have power. And when you have so everything's dead.
Oh, no.
So the screen tells me to roll down the windows, because if the windows are up, and you get outside the car and the power is out, the entire car is built on power, the whole thing. So I pull over and I call AAA. I'm like, hey, I need a tow truck ride, blah, blah, blah. So I'm on the side of this, and it's an on-ramp for 85, which is the main interstate to Greenville.
Yes.
So cars are on-ramping
we live in the South.
We live in the South.
I just want to point that out.
I learned that we definitely live in South Carolina.
We do.
I had people driving by yelling. I'm not sure exactly what they said, but the tone was clear that they were mocking me being in a battery-powered Tesla
on the side
in
of the road.
South Carolina, which is very. There are Teslas here, but you can tell
it's not the norm.
It's not cultural like California.
Yeah, I mean, there's big trucks, gasoline.
Trucks. So I'm there for a good hour and a half, enduring all these people mocking.
Yes.
What was even funny, one guy pulled up in a Tesla. He looked at me. We just kind of nodded at each other. It was kind of like a brotherhood.
Yeah.
He was like, I feel bad for you.
Like motorcycles do. I love that. Okay.
I got you. But then the funniest part was the AAA guy finally comes, and we can't get the car into neutral to get it pulled onto the truck. So there's a thing you do. You basically hook up a battery charge to it, and it opens everything up, and then just enough time to put it into tow mode. Well, while he's doing that, he's got this thing connected to in the front, which is the front part of the car, and this lifted Jeep pulled up, stops on the on-ramp, and yelled at the AAA guy and goes, "Are you charging that thing?" And the AAA guy is like, "Yeah," and I'm sitting in the front seat. I'm looking at him, and he just mockingly laughed, like just a barrel mocking laugh at me.
I love this.
And then he drives off, and I wanted to say a few words. I wanted to talk about how small his mind was. No, I didn't go there. But anyway, I gave him the look.
The look.
I gave him the look.
I could feel the look when you finally got to the leadership meeting.
I made it the last 15 minutes of our leadership meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a really long day.
It was a long day, that's for sure. By that point, you're just like, whatever. This is just how this day is going.
It's interesting because who would have thought, a lot of us have moved from different areas of the United States to come here. Mm-hmm. And so, and I feel like we've done really well. Like we have become a part of the culture, and things are starting to feel more like home. But I do think it's funny how sometimes it just kind of jolts you a little bit. Like driving a Tesla in our city is like you are at the forefront, the cusp.
Yeah.
I'm going
to be honest with you. Owning a Tesla psychologically has affected me.
Oh,
it's 100%. Like I didn't realize this pre-owning a Tesla. People said, the general perspective towards people that own Tesla is that they're cocky and arrogant, and they kind of think they're more. I was like, that's interesting. Now I've had one for a year. I'm like, you feel a sense of like
better than everyone.
I don't want to say better than everyone, because that's not probably the right thing to say.
Right. But you feel it. Oh my gosh.
There is a sense of like, well, it's interesting. I'm going to be honest.
No, I love this.
Psychologically, I can tell. I'm like, I can go faster than every car here. Like, there's very rarely does a car pull up next to me, and I think, Yeah, they have no chance.
Don't.
So much to the point that a Camaro, this was like a month ago.
Oh.
A Camaro pulled up to me, kind of a newer Chevy Camaro.
Yeah.
And I could tell he had an opinion about Tesla.
Yeah.
So he took off. Well, guess what I did? I took off, outpaced him, and I shouldn't have done it because my wife was in the car.
Oh, no.
She's like, Eric. I'm like, oh, okay. And I just kind of backed off. So anyways, owning a Tesla does something to you psychologically.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I'm probably outing her a little bit, but like when you were gone and you first got it, we drove it one time to her coffee shop, and she was like, "Look how fast this thing can go!" And she was like flooring it in the middle of the city. So I'm.
My wife, look at her. Okay, thank you for outing her.
Yeah. So she just showed us how.
Yep.
Yeah.
But there is a sense of like you're kind of on the forefront. You actually feel that when you're driving this car.
Yeah, and especially here.
Especially here. I had a friend who just spoke in Texas at a large men's conference, and at one of the big churches down there. And he shared it. Yeah, I bought a Tesla 6 years ago. The entire men's conference starts booing him, and he goes, "Oh, I forgot I was in Texas. You guys prefer your broken down Chevys, but that's okay." So anyway, but it's funny. Like you look across the nation,
Yes.
in certain areas, a battery powered car is a shock to the culture.
Yes.
So it's interesting. You go to California, it's the other way now.
It's the other way.
You're frowned upon if you have a gas car.
Well,
and that's shifting.
Eventually it's going to be illegal to have a gas
Like
car in California.
2035.
Yeah. So I mean, they're slowly shifting over there.
Yep.
But no, I think that's interesting and maybe kind of segues into the conversation that we want to have today. Because isn't it interesting that even like a Tesla going into a Texas church is deemed, is perceived, I'll say it that way, it's perceived a certain way. And so I would love to open up the conversation of how we perceive maybe artists or even things that we're not used to in the church and open up that conversation to just kind of see what happens where we go.
Yeah, I think it had to do with like people that are forward thinkers.
Yes.
And entrepreneurs, creatives. I mean, there's these people that would just prefer to enter this space that isn't established yet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because, and I'll just dive right in. As a creative myself, a lot of the comments that I get quite often in churches, and they mean well, is they look at me and they say, "Oh, you belong out in the world." That's one of my favorite statements. And I'm like, wow, like that's very interesting because I understand what they're saying, and but it also can be very alienating for artists to feel like, oh, you're not even trying to bring me in. You're almost pushing me out to, and you're doing it in a loving way. I mean, it really is. I think it really is in the mindset of just doing. They're like, oh, I see this gift that you have, and you should definitely go this way. So I think it's an interesting conversation because I think artists have felt alienated for so long in the church. And so what is that? What are they feeling? Why? Those are all of the questions I want to ask today. So
Yeah, the thing about someone that has a propensity to think outside the box or do things that are against, quote, status quo or the norm. So we're dealing with kind of, I usually don't like to compartmentalize humanity too much, but for the sake of a point, we kind of have to.
Yeah.
You kind of have the people that are on the fringe. Maybe they dress differently, or they have tattoos, or they think the future of vehicles is battery powered. I mean, you got all the spectrum.
All of the spectrum of it.
You got all of that, and so you have that. And I think what we have to remember, if that's not who you are or you're not in that space, then you have to remember the space you're in at one point was the future.
Yes.
So I think the general population is important for us to remember, like everything that we enjoy today, like the roof over our head, the lights we have. Can you imagine the transition from horses to cars?
Yeah.
Like imagine that transition. And it's actually, I didn't go in depth. A while ago, I started looking at some of the comments that were being made by people that owned horses and the people that started owning cars. Different material, but the same kind of comments are now being made today about gas cars versus electric cars. So it's interesting. So we have to remember the spaces we live in at one point was in the realm of chaos. I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
It's kind of not dark in the evil sense, but like what do you mean this thing is going to propel me without a horse?
Yeah.
Like just the spaces. So now what society is set up in at one point was actually the future. And so you have to ask the question, why, when someone makes a comment to you like, oh, you belong in the world.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you have to kind of, that person should go, why am I saying that? What's the logic and reason behind that? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I think it's, I'm going to do a lot of generalization, and I hate that, but just for our conversation. But I feel like artists, and I do believe that we were created this way, have very strong feelings. They feel a lot, especially walking into different areas. They'll feel the empathy with whatever area they're walking in. But that is actually what helps them feel where the change needs to take place. They can feel the pain, they can feel the discomfort, and in that, it might sometimes come into them or onto them, which is where I think we as a church, if we were doing well, discipling, learning how to not take that on, excuse me. And so, but that part of the deep emotion, I think, has scared people away of like, oh, this person's unstable, or this person, has very high highs and very low lows. But I don't think if you are around it long enough, you'll realize that rubbing that they're feeling is the very thing that's going to help them create the art or help them create the future. Something that you might walk into in the next decade or so that you find like brilliant was probably birthed from somebody that was feeling the angst or feeling the pain. So, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like there is the stigma around emotions has changed a lot in the last, let's just say decade.
Yeah.
Because the EQ, emotional health, has become more of a mainstream conversation. I think the one thing that, when it comes to emotions, so let me use myself as an example. I would say I'm deeply emotional. I just don't always show it. Probably the reason why I don't show it is because I don't want it to be misunderstood.
Interesting.
And so I know one of my insecurities is being misunderstood. It's probably one of my top insecurities.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a dichotomy for me because I put myself in front of
a lot of people. Yeah.
So the opportunity, the likelihood of being misunderstood is all the time for me.
Yeah.
So whenever I get into an emotional funk, it's usually I can trace it back to I really don't like being misunderstood, and it's really hard for me. So sometimes I find myself not showing my emotions because I'm like, I don't have the bandwidth right now to handle the reaction that I'm going to have to someone misunderstanding me because I have an emotion.
Wow.
A deep one or a strong one or a passionate one. And so that's an interesting, and that's an area I've grown in my entire life, and I want to grow in. But I would say the way I'm wired, I would say my emotion is actually my greatest strength.
Yeah.
So as a leader, so the other side of it, the leader in me goes, how do we create environments where emotions are not discouraged?
Yes.
They don't guide and make all the decisions.
Yeah.
But they are not discouraged.
That's really good.
And we don't use stigmas like, well, that's just an emotional person. Oh, they're just being emotional. I'm like, that has so much negative stigma.
Yeah.
When someone tells me that, I just like, two options. One, I fight back.
Yes.
Or it's like, okay, I am not going to show my emotions anymore.
Yeah.
And none of those are good options.
No.
And so I think we have to understand the emotional energy that, since we're talking about creators predominantly today, that is actually the thing that actually helps them to go into these spaces of chaos and bring beauty to it and order to it.
Yeah.
And the spaces we enjoy now, someone had to go into it against all the odds of how they're experiencing, how people perceive them, and all their internal emotion. They had to go into those spaces and bring beauty to it. And now today we could flip a switch and a light comes on because someone thought outside of what was normal.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting in the church, and maybe it's because we just haven't talked about it enough or even dissected it, or maybe just bypass it, but it's even studying Jesus's life or even studying the old prophets, I mean, Jesus was a storyteller, and he didn't just give it to people like, here's the 3 steps you need to do. He did it in a way of storytelling so that people are coming in, they're listening to the story, and it's causing something to happen here, because there's all these beautiful studies with art that when you are participating in art as an observer, whether that be dance or painting or whatever it is, it actually goes past your brain and goes directly into your heart. It starts speaking to your soul. And that's why artists are so important, because they can take maybe an idea that someone's trying to speak and it's hitting here. But if you can create an authentic dance piece or an authentic art piece, it will pierce the heart of the observer. So then that idea of like what we're trying to portray actually infiltrates your whole body. And so I think that that's why Jesus came and did what he did, was like, hey, I'm going to be the artist. And then what's really cool is that like, and what I find interesting is the church has almost stayed safe, I'm going to say it that way, and been like, hey, I don't know if we can allow these artists with their high emotions to come in and create whatever that looks like. But then you study again where Jesus was, and he used words like, and we say this even in our communion, he used words like, eat my flesh and drink my blood. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's graphic. Could you imagine getting up on the stage?
I'd most likely be one of the ones that left.
Yeah. Do you imagine? Yeah. I mean, like we say that and we're all like, yeah. But I'm like, if I were to get up on stage right now and say, hey, and I'm not, and use kind of terminology like that, a lot of the people in normal setting would not be okay with that. So like, how do we start opening and broadening the conversation and see that maybe like even our experience with Jesus, we could broaden, we could experience him in different areas if we would press into maybe allowing the artist to come in more. I don't know.
Yeah, no, the whole conversation that Paul has about the different parts of the body.
Yeah.
That's an amazing scripture. The feet doesn't complain about being the eye. And the eye is not saying, I wish I was a mouth. Each part of the actual human body is functioning. And when a body is functioning beautifully together, so when I have this conversation, I automatically go to thinking about that structure.
Yeah.
I think we think, oh yeah, I honor the eye, I honor the heart. Let's say you're the foot, for whatever reason. I'm the foot and you're the arm, and Josh is the other arm, and Emily is the brain. I don't know. We just started. That was a compliment, Emily.
Yeah, she's witty today. She's witty.
Emily came in spicy today.
She did come in spicy today. Yes, great.
So let's say, but the thing is, if I think, let's say I'm wired a certain way.
Yeah.
If my respect and honor is because you are wired like me, that's easy.
Yeah.
But the reality is the eye, the arm, and the leg have a completely different operating system than the foot, so to speak. So I think we have to look at it from a perspective like when people are operating in who they are, they're actually adding, and just because it doesn't look like you or think like you or sound like you. And that's the challenge. And so I would say for people that don't, so when people tell me I'm emotional, I say, no, I feel deeply.
Yes.
Can you frame it around that?
Yeah.
When you say emotional, it has so much stigma that I think there's so many things in them that had more negative. And I'm like, no, I feel deeply. I have the ability to actually feel really deep in some areas. And it's the bane of my existence. I mean, it really is. It's that thorn in my side of like, sometimes I wish I didn't feel this deeply.
I get that.
And especially being a pastor and a leader, we're dealing with hundreds, if not thousands of people and their expectations and all that. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much feeling. I was sitting down with somebody a while ago, and they're saying, hey, we'd like to give some feedback, and what do we need to do? And I said, just so you know, I can only handle so much.
Yeah.
And what am I wish I had the biggest bandwidth of feedback.
Yeah.
I can take feedback, but it has to come in increments for me.
Increments, yeah.
Because if not, it actually can sink me.
Yeah.
And then it takes me weeks to get out of it. So that's just my vulnerability and my, honestly, I feel like it's my humility in saying, listen, I can only handle so much. Because I feel everything.
Yeah.
Like it can throw me off. And so my point is saying that I think we can reframe some of the conversation around, you're emotional too. Oh, this is someone that feels deeply.
Yeah.
And they feel things that I actually don't feel.
Mm-hmm.
And like just that to me, like, okay, that had more of a bent toward, oh, you understand a little bit
Yeah.
versus, oh, you're just emotional. And they got get pushed over here.
Yeah, and if we can broaden our perspective of seeing that, hey, I am, the arm, the leg, everyone's different, and everyone carries something different. Then also, I'm able to celebrate what they carry and who they are, and I think, especially in today's age, like if we want artists to come into the church and stay and be a part, then I think we're going to have to be okay with the difference and the weird and even work on expanding our language. Like, and I think I have more compassion in saying this because we moved to the South. Mm-hmm. And I realized, like, a lot of us artists that moved first, we were like, let's do. We were like ready to move on. And you kept being like, wait. We need to see where our people are. And then to slow everything down and be like, hey, let's figure out how to take this group of people with us. Mm-hmm. Has been actually one of my favorite things because it was like, oh, you actually...
But would it all to be frustrating?
Oh, it was so frustrating. Yeah. Like, it was so frustrating.
Yeah.
We were, like, coming back as a group of artists being, like, banging our heads against the wall. And it wasn't easy, but it also taught me, like, oh, this is a weakness on my side because I would have just ran over these people because I'm like, this is what I see needs to take place. Yeah. And I wouldn't have taken them with me. And so I think artists do have to have that aspect as well, is like, hey,
it's really good.
Like, I know we're headed here and I'm going to build that. And it might be not the process that you want me to do, but I also would love to take as many people with me to do it. Yeah. And I think that's where the beauty is. Great point. Yeah, it's going to be really cool.
And I think, let's say, should that apply to everything to an artist or creative? Like, do you have to bring everybody with you? You don't.
No.
You don't. I think I would speak to all the artists and creative that like, I need then you go pioneer.
Go do it.
But don't put the expectation on
everyone.
The community.
Yes.
Like just be your creative, beautiful self and go explore those areas. The challenge comes when you do that and your expectation is, how come they're not coming along with me? I have to go, well, they actually don't see the world the way you see it at all. Yes. And so I think we talked about this on the phone recently. I said, I feel like the first couple of years was about just pioneering some things. Mm-hmm. And now I feel like we need builders. We need people that can actually, okay, how do we bring a community of people and actually build this thing versus just like, the flag had been put in the ground, and this is what we're doing, is our mission, our value, this is our, our cultural words. And then some people say, well, where's the evidence of that? That, they're evident, but it might not be to the degree that you wish it was at.
Yeah.
But we also have responsibility to help bring people into new spaces too. And so I think that's where the building part for me comes in. Like, okay, but I wanted to make sure we highlighted for you what you just said. Like, you've appreciated the pace, but it's also been frustrating.
Super frustrating.
I think that needs to be respected.
Yeah.
So it's not all like, oh, it's been deeply frustrating. If you were to ask me, are there things that I wish we were farther along? 100%.
Yes.
But at the same time, I'm thinking long game.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, how do we, and there's going to be early adopters. There's going to be people that are going to grab onto it and they're going to go into the chaos and create order. And then there's other groups that will come in and embrace it over time.
Yeah.
So I think we have to also go, as a creative, I can't expect everyone to come along at once. Mm-hmm. But some will come.
Yeah.
Some may come in 5 years. Some may come in 10 years. And so I think that's where we have to kind of not pace ourselves, but look at the long game.
Yeah. Because I feel like for whatever reason, and maybe it's out of safety, but I think we're missing maybe even facets of God. I'm going to say it, because of fear of like, oh no, this is the way it's been done, and so this is the way my mindset works, and this is how I experience God. And so when creatives come in and start to disrupt or cause, I understand that can cause fear and it can cause like, anxiety. Mm-hmm. But I'm having a lot of conversations right now around creativity, and I'm like, just look. I mean, for Christians, just look at your Bible. I mean, even going into the prophets, and I would say that's where a lot of artists in the church are. Mm-hmm. They are the prophets. They're the ones that do the bizarre things that you don't understand, but it's going to speak to you and it's going to make sense, and all the pieces are going to come together maybe in the future. So to give them...
Let me ask you a question on that. So let's talk to the person that had a knee-jerk reaction to someone that's exploring and, they're doing things creatively that is like, it's not familiar for one. what would you encourage that person to do other than having a knee-jerk reaction and rejecting it?
Yeah, so I think proximity. I think that's what I've learned so much about even coming here and being so different than everyone else, is that if I walk into a room and I just look at what they look like or their appearance, then I would just immediately be like, oh, they're going to make fun of you because you drive a Tesla, right? Like, I mean,
Totally.
that's the vibe they're
Guy
getting.
in the Jeep.
That guy in the Jeep, right? You're just going to read him and be like, you're going to make fun of me, right? But if I can lay down my biases, if I can be curious, if I understand that like there is something inside of all of us that is a facet of God, then I can get connected. And if I know your heart, and I know that you're not chaotic in the sense of like you're not doing something out of order or whatever, but there's this, oh, I don't understand this process, but I understand you. And I understand that like your heart and you love God. And so I might not ever understand why this is, but actually I understand that it causes change. And I had this beautiful conversation with someone in our church, and she said she came in, and when we first got here, we did a lot more dancing. And you know, Adam is... our dancing is very different than what you would see in traditional churches because, you know, Adam grew up in the hip-hop world. So it's not your traditional flags in the church. And so that was actually a really interesting, like, sharp point for people coming in at the beginning. And so I was talking to this lady, and she said, yeah, coming in, like, I had seen dancing in the church, but it was definitely not done the way that you guys do it. And so she said it was like really kind of like, And she said, but then the more that I was around it, it eventually like helped build the framework of my worship. And when you guys didn't do it, then it was like, oh, we're missing out on an aspect. So I was like, that was a win, because I'm like, okay, someone came in, had no context. It felt prickly to them. And now it's like, oh, when you don't do it, I miss it. And so I'm like, that's where if we would have just done and just bulldozed, then we might not have taken them with us.
So proximity and asking questions, seeking to understand.
Yeah.
And so anybody out there, especially, you know, specifically for our community, if you're having a knee-jerk reaction to anyone that's kind of exploring, you know, frontline stuff creatively and exploring some areas, instead of having a knee-jerk reaction, get in proximity and ask questions.
Yeah.
And then really, I would also add to that, avoid stereotyping statements.
Yeah.
And just be aware when you make statements like, this is just... you don't have a grid for it, so you just stereotype it.
Yeah.
That's why I think we tend to stereotype. Like, I don't have a grid for it, so you are one of these.
Yeah.
And that way I can keep you at a distance. So proximity, asking questions, seeking to understand. Now let's talk about the creative.
Okay.
When they walk into a room and they're already feeling like, oh, I'm about to be critiqued, judged, or not. Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, that's real.
That's the soul of a creative right there.
It is.
And you even shared an example. You came into a meeting and you were wearing tube socks and slides.
Mm-hmm.
And
the comments were funny.
The comments were like,
wow, that's a bold choice.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm wearing tube socks and okay.
They're super comfortable. I do it all the time.
Like,
Socks and slides.
I teach. It's funny because I teach dance in that to like 400 kids in a room, and it's like, okay, but here it's wild. Yeah.
Almost every Sunday, I'll get a comment on what I wear.
Yes, 100%.
Almost every Sunday.
I do too.
And I don't consider myself
I'm not that crazy.
I am not like. I'm not out there.
Yeah.
But I am out there for some people.
Yes.
So, even not wearing skinny jeans right now, you always get comments.
Well, you're a pastor. You should be wearing skinny jeans.
Exactly. And that era ended a while ago.
I love this because that just shows you're a creative right there. You're like, that's so... We've moved on. That's so last year. Anyways.
That thing got every drop possible got squeezed out of it.
Yes.
And then there was no more drops, and it kept
going. Yes. Again, because,
But what's interesting is it becomes an identity.
That's what I was going to say.
It becomes like, who am I without my skinny jeans?
Yeah.
This is my look. This is my feel.
This is my brand.
This is my brand.
That's what it is. Yeah.
And so I get comments every Sunday about what I'm wearing, and I don't consider myself a fringe. I love clothing and fashion and shoes. I really do, but I'm not like, I don't know. I don't even have the word for it. Yeah. But I still get comments.
Yeah.
And, like my favorite outfit would have these camo pants with my Jordan 4s.
Yes.
Or my Jarritos Dunks.
You're in the South.
And and then just a really, just a kind of a baller t-shirt with that. That, for me, I'm like, oh, yeah. But if I wear it in certain contexts, it's shocking. Like, whoa, you can't do this. In other contexts, they think I'm a hunter.
Yes. That's what
And
I was going to say.
so I think it's just, you have to understand, we're in a different world. We're in
Very
different
different
realities.
worlds. Yes.
So I almost wore that outfit in Northern California last year.
Yeah.
And I didn't, because I'm like, no, I'm not communicating a hunting vibe. This is a very different vibe. So even for me, I mean, this to be honest with you, I think about what I'm going to wear before I go into my closet.
Oh, 100%.
Like, I like to kind of have an idea of what I'm going to wear the day before. It helps
Yeah.
me to have a better morning.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I just start, I care. And to me, it's a statement.
It is a statement. It's an expression of who you are.
Expression of who I am.
And so even, I think that's where, unfortunately, I'm not saying that artists are, they need to grow out of the orphan spirit and
So let's
and
get
not
back
see
to that.
that.
Yeah.
Yes. But I do feel like it has, especially in the church, I come in a little guarded. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's from
But I'll
experience.
think that you've grown a lot in 3 years.
I have.
You have.
This is,
Compared to where I've known you 3
Yes.
years ago when we started here,
yeah.
I definitely, I don't want to
Yeah.
emphasize it, but yes. And where you are today, you've definitely grown.
It's, yeah.
So just to compliment you.
Thank you. It's been frustrating, but it's good. But I will say, like, you are a little guarded because you're like, oh man, I just wanted to wear my tube socks and I didn't know it was going to cause such a, you know what I mean? And so I think, like, if that would have been me 3 years ago, would I have just been really frustrated? Yeah, probably. And so I feel, and now it's like, oh, I know these people and it's funny and you just kind of laugh at it. But I think
proximity helps.
and proximity helps because I have a relationship with these guys.
Yeah.
But I have to say that's where the orphan spirit, especially in the church, comes, because I know, like, I kind of have to psych myself up, like on Sundays. I know I want to dress like this. And that is my choice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could go buy what everyone wears and it's fine, and then no one would make a comment, or maybe they would because they're not used to it. But what is going on? But I will say, like, I prep myself for the comments, and it's interesting, even being here in the South, like, you know, getting my hair cut, finding someone that cut short hair for a girl was a 3-year process.
Yeah.
And even when I got my hair cut yesterday, the entire salon is making comments about my hair. And then they're like, literally a comment was, do you have guys tell you that that's not attractive?
That's amazing.
And I'm like, whew, okay, yes, this is amazing. Anyways, but that, you know, just the stereotypes. And going back, so that's why artists have a protection, or like, I'm going to walk in and I have this fear of, like, what are you going to do with my heart? Because I feel deeply, and this is one of my expressions a lot of times, is my dress, or outwardly, this is how I produce that. So I come in a little guarded, and then that becomes my identity and it becomes my mindset. And then I think now every time I walk into a room that you're going to judge me and I'm not going to belong. And then that causes that's where the separation is. And so they say, I don't feel like I feel connected. And I'm like, well, that's partly, yes, I understand where you're coming from, but that also is partly because you come in guarded, and people can feel that.
Yeah.
And they feel isolated from you. So why would they invite you?
So I think environment should be aware that your comments towards someone that feel deeply and had the creative bent, those comments aren't just hitting their head. It's hitting the essence of who they are.
Yeah.
So I think it helps us as a community to be aware. I need to be aware of what I'm saying to someone, because this could be a dagger when I meant it as a fun, lighthearted
Funny,
joke.
lighthearted joke, yes.
And so I think we just need to have increase our awareness around that. But I'll speak to the creative, like, you have to be aware. It's naivety and it's ignorance if you don't expect someone to, if you expect no one to say something.
Yes.
Like, that's just naivety and ignorance.
It's
so
your choice.
I am having to train myself now. Okay, I have an idea, and there are going to be comments.
Yes.
Or I'm going to put this on today. I have to psychologically,
You do.
emotionally prepare myself. So I would say, but then I would also address more of the soul issue. Like, okay, what are the insecurities there? And I think this is a general statement, but I think it's one of the challenges for creative, that they want to be accepted.
100%.
And so the fear is being rejected, being neglected, not being accepted.
Yeah.
And so that issue, no one will ever solve that for you.
Mm-hmm.
And no one will ever get it right. So you, as a creative, have to do the work to build up that in you. So Candace and I were talking about this last night, like going, The goal for every human, but specifically creative, is to get to a place where, like, when I go into any environment, I have enough confidence, security in who I really am. And in our faith, like, I know what God says about me as a human. I know my identity comes from Him. All those things are so rooted. And I would encourage anybody in the creative space, like, you want to grow in that area.
You have to.
If you're waiting and relying on others to bring that to you, that's short-lived. It feels great in the moment, but it's not the long-term plan. So I think we're talking about two sides of the same conversation. We're talking about a culture and a community to be more open-minded, ask questions, proximity, and to be aware your comment and statement actually do affect them deeply.
Yeah.
And some of them have left.
They have.
They've left. And that that's on all of us.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's just a human issue. And then for the creative, like, you need to grow in your confidence, your identity, and who God says you are and who you are as a human being.
Yeah.
And then go into environments knowing, not everyone's going to like it because you are on the margins.
Well, it's so interesting because, I recently I've been doing some different studies, and the word heart in the Bible, I looked it up in the Hebrew language, which is L-E-B, which is lev, because it's a V instead of a B. And it actually, when he says, like, hey, keep my commandments close to your heart, or, like, anytime he says anything to do with heart, it actually means the center. I didn't realize this. The center, the will, the intellect, the heart. I mean, it encompasses everything. It's not just like, does that, I don't know. It was kind of mind-blowing to me because I was like, oh, me feeling deeply is actually is a facet of God that He's put into me. And it's actually in Scripture that, like, when I go close to Him, when He says, give you my heart, it's all of me. It even says emotions in that as well. I was like, wow, that's crazy that would encompass one word in the Hebrew language would encompass all of this. And so I think, to pull back and to give guidance of what it's like to be on the other side, not the artist, but to people that participate around artists, is like, hey, know that this is like their life. When they say yes to something, especially to you most of the time, like, if you have an artist that says yes to you, you have a lifer. You have someone that's going to give you their all, and they might die. Yeah, like, being so loyal to you. And that's just because that's how artists are. They're like, hey, I'm going to commit fully to you. And so, unfortunately, the problem with that is that if you hurt, then it causes this whole, like, I'm going to feel the end spectrum of the hurt to it. And so it's like, okay, we need to dial that in and to guide that and to show people, like, that's not a decision maker, all of the things that we talk about. But it is a good thing to be aware of, is that as we bring more artists into the church, is that they're not going to look, they're not going to dress, they're not going to act the way you do. But that doesn't mean that they don't love God or they're not more spiritual. I look at people like Justin Bieber and the people that are in that kind of fringe that have given their heart to God. And then the comments, especially like Kat Von D, the comments of, like, she's blacked out, tuxedoed all of her tattoos. That is so much pain. Anyways. And then, like, people were like, well, you haven't done hours, right? And then people are like, well, you haven't done your hands yet. These are, like, that's what Christians are saying to her. And I'm like, she just gave her heart to God a couple of years ago. You have no idea what's inside of her because you have no proximity to her, but all you can see is this outward expression of her past life, and you comment, or because she has a different edge to her, or even if Justin Bieber, has slip-ups, like, who's around, who's partnering with those deep feelers, So that's where I'm like, I love this conversation because I feel like there is, we're going back to the spiritual gift conversation. There is a lot of words about the church that it's going to look different. And there's going to be people coming into the church that are just not going to be the typical vibe. And so I think it's really imperative that we start having this conversation. So when these people come in, that they get to be with you, because it's important. They need mothers. They need brothers, sisters, mothers. They need that.
Yeah. And I would speak to anybody listening to this that's specifically part of our studio community. This is an area that, if it were easy, I think it would be done. You would see it all over.
You would see it everywhere. So
I just want to just give ourselves some encouragement, some charges, and thoughts on this. Like, if it was easy, it'd be more common. It is somewhat complex to create a culture and a community that involves so many different kinds of people.
Yeah.
And are we getting it right? Are we messing up? The answer is yes.
Yes.
Yes. We should have did that differently.
Yeah.
Man, I regret that. But at the time, you're just doing your best.
Yes.
But I would say for the studio, for our community, like this is a really deep part of who we are. This is why our vernacular is the way it is. This is why our cultural words are what they are.
Yeah.
This is all in there, but we still are building it. We're still doing it. And so I would ask for anybody, however this conversation hits you, that's a part of studio, each of us have a part in it.
Yeah.
And I love what you said, proximity is, that's why, from day one, proximity.
Yeah, you got to get close to
on
it.
Just have to have proximity.
Yeah.
And that really does help a lot. And then just increasing our awareness of different kinds of people.
Yeah.
And avoiding the stereotypes and avoiding the stigma that are attached to our words. And so I just want to ask for people in our studio community to join us, not just you and me, but just our team, in building an environment that is multidimensional.
Yes.
We've got all kinds of different people in this spaces, and we are seeking to learn.
Yeah.
We had a leadership meeting the other night, and someone said, one of the things I've learned in being here is not having a knee-jerk reaction to everything.
Yeah.
And I thought,
like that
is such a win. Especially in today's society, it's like, man, if we could not have knee-jerk assumptions and reactions, we can go a long ways.
We can go,
long ways. And so my heart is that studio as a culture becomes a place where my dream is that studio, we don't end up dressing all the same.
Yes.
We don't end up looking all the same, because you can get into church cultures like, oh, they all dress the same.
Yeah.
They all look the same. And I'm like, man, I hope we're so diverse. And for some people, like, this is
weird.
I don't even know what to categorize. I'm like, good.
Yeah.
That's really good. I want to celebrate the uniqueness of humans.
Yeah.
The uniqueness. If you're wearing the camo hunting jacket with a NASCAR hat, all the way to the guy over here wearing Yeezys with the baggiest pants, they're barely hanging on to tattoos. I want all of it.
Yeah.
I want people that really celebrate their cultures and ethnicities. You have people from Latin cultures, from African cultures that have a certain dress. I'm like, I want to see that. So I'm excited about the possibilities. And so, because I believe we're richer and deeper, and we experience God even more when we celebrate the uniqueness.
That's it.
And so, but it's a lot of work to create an environment where there's uniquenesses. It's so much work. It's a lot of emotional work. It's a lot of organizational work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
and it's worth it, though.
Yeah, I think it's funny because when we say we're a multidimensional culture, that is such a great buzzword, and but I feel like, and I'm not bragging on us, but I am bragging on us a little bit. But we have really, the last couple of years, I think we're laying foundation for it, and it excites me because I'm like, I think I shared with you, but there's this. There was a guy that created a tree that grafted in like 40 different fruit trees into one tree, and it created 40 different fruits on that tree, and it survived.
I don't know if you shared.
I didn't. Maybe you didn't hear that story. Okay, maybe you weren't in the room. Yeah, and so it was just really interesting because it's one tree, but it looks different and it produces different fruit. And I thought
maybe that's a metaphor for us.
That's what I'm saying.
It's a living metaphor.
It's a living metaphor because it's like, I'm not asking you to be an orange tree to be grafted into us. Like, you could actually still be you and still be grafted in. And that, I think, is Jesus, right? Like, that's what the church is going to look like. And so we have to be okay with realizing that the church isn't going to feel, sound, or look just like I see and my perspective is. And that is hard.
Yeah,
that's so hard.
It's a lot of time and energy.
It's a lot of work.
But I think it's good to look back at 3 years and go, oh, it's
coming.
It's happening.
Yeah.
It's actually happening. I think there are some indicators, some symptoms. There's some areas that we probably should have done it differently, but we're learning and growing.
Yeah.
Because, like we said, if this was easy, I think it'd be more common.
Yeah.
And so
this
is a fun discussion.
It was, and I'm going to call out all the artists that if you come to Greenville, come be a part.
And then all of our artists. Actually, I want to encourage our whole church community to listen to this talk.
Yeah.
I think this is a big part of who we are.
Yeah.
Where we're going.
I love it.
It's a reminder because we've talked about it before, but this one feels really specific.
Yeah, it's good. Okay.
Yeah, and help us create the future.
Oh, I like that.
Help us create the future.
Come on.
This is a part of the future. I believe the future of the body of Christ.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a great day. Thanks for listening.
Yes.
Please leave comments, questions, all of the things.
Don't make fun of Tesla drivers that are broken down.
No,
on the road.
yeah, that's deep. Know that you are hurting their heart deeply when you do that.
That's right.
All right, have a great
See you
day.
guys.
Bye.